What's up, YouTube? I hope you enjoyed that little montage I put together. I'm trying to get a little bit better with the video editing to show you guys what I've been working on. So this is another example of that. We are at a point where I think this alfalfa is ready to go public and go live. So I thought I'd make a little video showing off all that you can do with it with a full and complete install. So we'll jump in this tractor right here and go check out the field. Uh, I've been slow to release some things, of course, but just trying to be careful with some of the quality and try to make things as easy as possible. So part of this will include a little bit of install on how to get this working on your map. So first and foremost, we'll jump over to this field and we'll get started with the tutorial. So when you first download, you'll get a zip file that just has Alfalfa in it, and it'll have all these files here, which is great. Unzip those, put them in your map. For my map in particular, my file structure is the map name, then maps, and I have this foliage folder. It may be different from your map. Just remember where you put it. Try to group them together with the rest of your foliage types. So unzip it, and you can just drop that whole folder into here. We will reference it later. The first and most important step is not necessarily doing that, but setting up the map.i3d. So I'm going to open the map.i3d in a text editor. Okay, so we're going to go Control F and find our foliage multi-layer. I don't need to type the whole thing, but so this is where all the foliage types for our map are identified. There is a limit, but if you're just adding one foliage like alfalfa, you should be good. I don't remember offhand what the limit is, how many of these you can have. But for something like alfalfa, see, I've already added it, but we'll pretend we didn't here. I'm going to find something similar, and let's just take, I don't know, it really doesn't matter. So we'll take sorghum. See, we've got an XML ID. All I'm going to do is Control D on this line and duplicates it. And my name for this is alfalfa, all lowercase. And what I do to make this really simple and easy to remember, I add 3 zeros to the end of them, XML ID. Now it needs to look, when it loads the map, it needs to know where to look to find details for this new crop you've added called alfalfa. So to find that, right now we've already got sorghum defined, and it is number 637 in my case. It may be different for yours. But I'm going to find 637. I'm going to go up with where I find it. Boom, file ID 637 is our sorghum XML. So I'm going to duplicate this, but because this is alfalfa, I'm going to change the name. Alfalfa, and then remember, I added 3 zeros to make it easy to remember. As soon as you open the map in Giants Editor and save, this number will change. As long as they're linked now, you'll be okay. And this folder path is exactly what I talked about earlier. So foliage. From the map i3d, it's going to look in the foliage folder. Then it's going to look in the alfalfa folder. And then it's going to look for alfalfa XML. So as long as those are linked, open the map. And there will be more work to do, but that gets you started. Okay, so next thing you'll do is pretty simple. You'll download my alfalfa file off my itch page. You'll get a zip. I can't guarantee it'll be named this, but regardless what it's named, you will extract it or unzip it. Do rename it to alfalfa, all lowercase. And then in your map, just Control C. Go to your map, wherever all your other foliage files are. See, in my case, I already have this, but you'll Control V. That'll put all these files into your maps, foliage, alfalfa folder in my case. Now, if you've done your linking correctly, your map i3D should point to the exact location where this alfalfa XML is. From this alfalfa XML, this is going to point to several other things. Most importantly is our alfalfa i3D. In our case, it's already in the same folder, so nothing to change here. So next thing to take a look at, the map has some definitions for fruit types, fill types. These have changed from FS22. The way to find these, go to your map XML. You can search to make things faster. There'll be, so I'm using Thunders right now. There'll probably be a line that looks like this fruit types, where it has a data. Well, yeah, regardless of what this says, you want to source this locally. So it'll have like a data, $ data, maps, map US, something like that, fruit types XML. I want to change this to, and what I would do is just go to the data folder and find this map fruit types, map fill types, and the density height types. Copy these and put them somewhere in your map folder. I make an XML folder in my map. I put them in here, and I also just rename them for my own sake. But I've copied them here, maps XML, and that's where I'm defining them here. Maps XML, fruit types XML, fill types, and density map height types. I am not certain if you need the Thunder default type script just to add a fruit or a foliage type. I don't think you do. I use this mainly to overwrite some of the base game stuff. That's a whole nother tutorial, whole nother video. But this should work doing it this way. But if you use Thunder's script, just make sure you're referencing them correctly here. So once they're defined, the map knows where to look for information about the fruit type itself, the fill type, and the density map. We'll start with our fruit type. Very simple here. Take any one of these lines, duplicate it, and then you need to again point to where we had our alfalfa XML. So that would be, in my case, the maps folder, maps, foliage, alfalfa, alfalfa XML. So we go maps, foliage, alfalfa, alfalfa XML. So those are linked. I didn't need to duplicate this in my case, but make sure you've got a line here that points to the alfalfa XML. Next, you want to have all of your fruit type categories defined. For me, I put it in, you can put it in maize cutter. That's for like a forage corn head. I don't know why I put it in that, to be honest. Direct cutter would be a disc head for a forage harvester. Sowing machine, I do want to plant this with a drill or a seeder, so I did put alfalfa in there. I didn't put it in planter or planter small. Only other thing is mower. Mower is important so that you can mow it down. I also put it in combine mower too, so that I could knock it down with a draper if I wanted. But this is user preference where you put it. Just make sure you put a space between each word, but put in all caps alfalfa, so that it knows alfalfa should be used by these types of equipment. Last thing in fruit types is our fruit type converters. So a forage harvester, when it picks up alfalfa, or what's it gonna do? In our case, I'm not gonna direct cut anything like with a corn head. So I have this set up incorrectly. Maize cutter, alfalfa. I can remove it from there because I don't think it's necessary to have a direct cut there. If we did, we would define it there, what the fruit is, and then what it becomes when we chop it. If you want to create another fill type called alfalfa windrow, there's more steps to that process. You can do that. Or you can do chaff for silage, or you can just turn it into grass windrow when a forage harvester picks it up. Sometimes if you're a beginner map maker, that's easiest because then it turns into grass windrow. You can handle it with base game mechanics from there. but I'm going to leave this commented out. Mower will be important. So when a mower hits an alfalfa crop, what does it do to it? In my case, I want it to go from alfalfa to alfalfa windrow. If there's a yield scale factor, you can apply that there. I'm not worried about that right now. But I also put this line in the alfalfa, or in the combine mower too, meaning like a draper head on the MacDon. But that's all you need to do in fruit types. Most of the other things are defined in the alfalfa XML. Next one would be our fill types. So at the top, you've got fill type converters. For me, since I made alfalfa windrow, and I also have dry alfalfa windrow as fill types, again, this is more complicated and it takes more work, but do define it like this in your tedder section. That way, if a tedder hits it, it'll convert to dry. You also need to reiterate this so a tedder can still move dry alfalfa windrow around. A pickup header, so this would be for our forage harvesters. When we're using a pickup head, what do we want done with that? So the way I have it set is both alfalfa and dry alfalfa. If we pick up a windrow with a forage harvester, it's going to convert both of those to chaff. You don't have to do that. You could just leave it as alfalfa windrow and handle it separately there, but I just convert it to chaff and use base game mechanics from there. Next thing, I'll put the entries I use for alfalfa and dry alfalfa in the download, but I more or less copied a lot of the grass characteristics. So let me hit enter a few times to separate this visually. But this is really what this entry looks like. So the fill type name, that has to link to the crop name. So we need that to just be alfalfa. Title is what it actually shows in game. So if you want it to say alfalfa or alfalfa haylage or windrow, that's just the text it'll show on screen in game. This is necessary, and this is, in theory, it's for the alfalfa seed going through a combine. Our next fill type here, alfalfa windrow, is its own. So that's why we can call it kind of what we want. But I'm having the text on the screen show alfalfa again. There's some price factors, some economy factors, but this is also where we define the textures too. So I'll need to include the fill planes to include on your map. So in your map, I have a fill planes folder, and that's where I put these alfalfa textures, and that's what you'll see when you drop the windrow on the ground. So a diffuse, a normal, and a height map. I actually just use regular displacement, like a base game file for that, mimicking something there, and then a distance. But again, these names need to point exactly to where your fill planes are. Otherwise, you'll see either like all black or all white windrows on the ground, and you'll have errors in your game. It's because of this right here. You don't need to do that with alfalfa because we're not going to dump any alfalfa seed on the ground. Dry alfalfa is just very, very similar. Only difference is I have different textures for that. So I put both of these fill types in there so we can use them separately. So I may be speeding through that, but hopefully some of that makes sense. One small detail I missed. So I'm going to add this and simplify where you enter alfalfa into your map's fill types. So this is more what the file will look like, but at the bottom of the fill types, I forgot to mention that there are some fill type category definitions you need to add alfalfa to. So I deleted the ones you don't need to worry about, but alfalfa, alfalfa windrow, and dry alfalfa windrow. Just copy those names into each of these like so. And also for the fill type sounds, so when you're dumping alfalfa out of a trailer or something, it'll make a grass fill sound. So just copy those names into this section here. Last thing you'll want to do is your density map height types. And really all I've done here is I take grass windrow, select it, Control D to duplicate it. And then I would call this alfalfa windrow. I do the same thing for dry alfalfa windrow. Whoops. Duplicate it, dry alfalfa windrow. This just tells the game how thick to make the windrows relative to the yield and some other factors. But basically, copying grass is pretty acceptable for most players. Okay, so last thing we want to do, we want to have effects come when we mow the crop down, pick up the windrow with a baler, those sorts of things. So what I always do, first of all, those motion path effects, if you're in your map XML, there will be a line item for motion path effects. I change this instead of the $ data for the base game. I put this in a local area. So I make my own effects folder, and I literally go data, effects, and this motion path effects. I copy it over into my maps effects folder. So I've already done that, motion path effects right here. You can start with most of these or all of them on just the $ data. It eliminates a lot of work. You don't need to do everything right away. But things that will be important will be our tedder effects and our windrower effects, as well as our mower and pickup effects. So these, let's see, let me highlight them all. This line, well, you get the idea. Tedder, windrower, pickup, and mower. So I will go back to the base game files, effects, and for each of these, so I want tedder first. So let's go tedder. I'll copy this one into my map folder. I'll copy the windrower into my map folder. I'll copy pickup. And I'm just copying the XMLs, and then I'll copy mower. Those are the four that I think that I'll need the most for alfalfa. So in effects, you see I've got windrower, tedder, pickup, and mower. You notice I don't have a ton of I3Ds here. Some of this stuff I use for combines, but for the alfalfa part of it, something like a mower, for that mower to kick out a windrow effect. Basically, you open this up. I don't need to change hardly anything in here. It can still reference the base game effect file, the I3D. That's fine. All we're doing is we're adding fill types to this at this point. So wherever you see grass windrow, we'll also want to put alfalfa windrow. Same thing goes for down here. So grass windrow, I put alfalfa and alfalfa windrow in here. That way, whenever a mower is cutting alfalfa, it kicks out a grass-like effect. As long as we're correctly pointing the map XML to this motion path effect, and then the motion path effect can correctly point to our different effect files, then a lot of the effects are pretty easy from there. So pickup effect, another example. You see I've got grass windrow again. That's also where I want to put my alfalfa windrow. So you copy that into there. And same thing, there's lots of different pickup effects, but we want alfalfa is going to be most closely aligned with grass. So anywhere you see grass windrow, put a space, put alfalfa windrow, and also dry alfalfa windrow in there too. And just make sure you check the whole document, because like pickup effects, for example, there's two different sections, pickup in and pickup out. Tedder effects, same idea, and windrower effects. So copy all those over. Shouldn't need to change a whole lot, just XML work to get all the effects, and that will remove a lot of errors when you go into game. So last thing, just as a quick sanity check, of course, open up your map in Giants editor. This will be the first place to look for errors. If you've got any errors, especially in the foliage section. See, it's loading the i3D successfully. Usually about here it'll throw errors, but look for anything related to the alfalfa. Quick sanity check, especially to make sure you've got file paths set correctly, pointing to the right spot. But as you can see, we'll pull this up. See on my list, I've got, at the top, alfalfa. And now I can paint this down. Everything looks good. So scroll through, I always check all the growth states, both up close, and then I zoom out too to make sure the LODs and all the distances look blended, which they do. So I can save this if I want. I don't have to, but close this out and we can test in game. Okay, so now we're loaded up in game. We can see I already kind of pre-set up and pre-cut this field just to show, but it should look pretty good. We've got two different harvestable states. We've got one with the purple and one without purple. So as this is growing, it will get to this growth state. You can mow it, but if you check the XML of the alfalfa that I provided, if you look really closely, so we've got harvest ready with all these details. Green middle is harvest ready true. That means you can in fact mow it, but there is a small penalty. So you only get 80% of the yield. So there's a 20% knock. You could probably change that if you want it more realistic. But as you can see, I'll jump in this swather here. And if I wanted to mow this down, I sure could. Makes a nice windrow. Or, ooh, squirrely. Or if I want to jump across at this other growth stage, I could mow that too. So won't get quite as much yield, but you can get more cuttings because of the calendar. Calendar right here. So plantable, and then this harvestable is because of the way I built it. It does show harvest season all year because technically you can cut it at several growth stages, but you get the idea. So we got a nice texture for our alfalfa. That's from our fill plane. That I'll include those files. Just make sure you put them in the map correctly as we grow. And then if we were to TED this, it will dry down like so. It's also got a custom texture there. And then just to show, so like this is technically a tedder, but you see all the effects coming off the rake wheels, merging everything together. And we don't have any effect errors. I got some other errors with the map right now, but no effect errors, so that everything's working with alfalfa just like it should. So it can be raked, it can be tedded. If we jump in our forage harvester here, he's thinking, but I'll just kind of chop. You see the pickup header. It does make the effects. It's technically dry grass that it shows, but it's making all the effects, not throwing any errors. And then the way I have this defined, it is kicking out chaff into the trailer. And if I scoot over, I can also pick up, I don't have to dry it because, I mean, we're chopping this. If we pick up the wet alfalfa, we can do that too. The way I have it set up converts to chaff. Last but not least, we defined it as a fill type that we can bale. So you see this dry alfalfa is getting baled up, and we are spitting out bales. And that can be whether or not we've got a round baler or square baler. Custom bale sizes, custom bale types, that's a whole nother tutorial. I'm not going to get into that in this video, but if you install everything correctly, you should be able to do a lot of this, especially if you just make it into a dry grass windrow. That's probably my advice for beginners here. So without further ado, I hope you guys enjoy this. I hope it makes your farm simulator experience just a little bit better. Like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next one.